Hello, class. This is Frank, and this is the last screencast for the class on project-based learning. For this particular assignment, we had to read chapters 3, 4, and 5. We'll start with chapter 3. Chapter 3, Imagining the Possibilities. The key takeaway I had from this chapter was inspiring students through projects. The projects that typically involve the community of the students, the community that the students live in, typically help them gain interest in learning because it relates to them. Well-designed projects help students stretch their muscles that traditionally or that traditional learning may not activate. These two I found on page 66 of the book. One of the main takeaways from chapter 3 was that it is critical these projects are assigned to students are disciplined and concise. Like, you don't want it to be like students being confused on what they have to do. Like, you want to make sure it's easy for them to understand. It is my job as a future educator to assign projects that inspire students to think critically, collaborate with one another, and inspire students to be creative. That's what I got from chapter 3. Here's a little picture of students working together, collaborating together. Future use. As a future teacher, there were some helpful things in this chapter. On page 68 of the book, the author goes over traditional biography assignments and reconsidered biography assignments. As a future educator, I plan on using the reconsidered biography assignments in the classroom to help my students get a much more deep understanding of their project. The first point, the traditional biography assignments, I'm pretty sure everyone's done that before. It's pretty vague. It's just basically an overview of a historical figure. We'll use Ronald Reagan, for example, in his notable life achievements, very shallow level knowledge. The reconsidered biography assignments go much more in depth in the person or the event we're researching and compare it. Say we're doing Ronald Reagan. Instead of just using Ronald Reagan, we research a few other presidents that were Republicans from the same time period and compare them. And I feel like the students would get much more out of their learning doing the reconsidered biography assignments as opposed to traditional. So I plan on implementing the reconsidered biography assignments in my future classroom. Like I said, another example, here's a picture of Herbert Hoover. So we can link him to the Great Depression. So the students are learning about not only Hoover, but also the Great Depression. So that would be an example of a reconsidered biography assignment. Agree or disagree? Chapter 3 with author. I agree with author when it comes to the idea of the whole idea of learning dispositions. The author states on page 71 of the book that learning dispositions are important traits or attitudes that cannot be directly taught. I believe that learning dispositions are acquired through experiences and encouragement from the teacher. So these are not like innate things that are with us when we were born. It's fostered in a learning environment, I think. So us as future teachers, future educators, we can build students' confidence, curiosity, and cooperation in the classroom. And I think that's our job as teachers. So I totally agree with the author here in chapter 3. We move on to chapter 4, strategies for discovery. I believe that the key concept of this chapter was to focus on projects reaching significant learning outcomes. It is key that these projects encourage learning of the material, not just merely using technology for the sake of using it. We actually want to reach something. We want to reach these learning outcomes when we assign students projects that involve technology and whatnot. The textbook shows that these projects should make students want to learn more, ask questions, and believe that the material is really important. And that was according to Danae McGrath on page 85. And I totally agree with her here. It's super important that the students are getting something out of their learning. I want them to believe that me teaching them the material or them working on the projects isn't just to keep them busy. It's to actually help them foster a love for learning. So it's definitely something important that I got from this chapter, reaching significant learning outcomes. as we move on. How to ensure the best project. As a future teacher, page 87 of the book was a key tool for me because it shared the most important features of projects. I thought like the three key points that I took away from it were having students learn by doing. I think in a practical sense, this is super important because students should be actually interacting with the material as opposed to getting secondhand experience with it. Two, reach beyond school to involve others. It's important to have them realize that this life isn't just about them, that they should try to involve others in everything they do to build those relationships that are so important later on in life. And to use real life experience to get to students' interests. I feel like it's easier to connect the material if students can actually relate to it and it spikes their interest. So I think projects should be based on that. I think that would be the best way to ensure that the projects will be fun. Do I agree or disagree? In chapter 4, constant theme in all three chapters that I read was that good project ideas can be found almost anywhere. The author states that most ideas for projects come from news stories, contemporary issues, and from other teachers, and I totally agree with that. People are interested in the news and contemporary ideas. I personally believe that I plan on getting most of my ideas for projects from other teachers. People who have been there before, people who have been through the ringer, people who have been teaching for 10, 15 years. These teachers have a lot of knowledge, and since they've been doing their job for so long, they have an idea of what works and what doesn't work. So I definitely plan on collaborating with other teachers in the district or in the school on what projects would be beneficial for that certain class or assignment. As we move on to chapter 5, making assessment meaningful, I thought quality work was definitely the forefront of the chapter. So common understanding needs to be developed when it comes to performance assessments so everyone is on the same page. We don't want to reinvent the wheel too much. We don't want to make people confused or students confused. We want to make sure that everyone is on the same page in the sense that the rubric is easy to follow. So like the second point says, building a quality rubric helps a teacher think about the learning targets that need to be addressed. And the categories that rubric should address should include knowledge, skills, and dispositions, according to page 104. So here's an example right here of a social science rubric. I plan on teaching history in high school, so I thought this was a very useful one. And it's super concise, super straightforward, so I feel like it would be easy for students, fellow teachers to follow along. As we move on, future use as a teacher. In my future classroom, I plan on using the project timeline mentioned in the chapter. I think that establishing milestones can help students chunk their work in a way that is much more manageable for them and less stressful. When there is a sense of order, I feel like students thrive much better in that setting than if something's not organized. I know I've had teachers in the past that would assign a project for us to do, and they wouldn't set up like milestones. They wouldn't set up like a time frame for us or a timeline. So I would forget about the project until a couple of days before it was due, and I would end up submitting a project that was put together at the last minute. So it wasn't like my best work, as opposed to if I was given a good timeline. I feel like my work would have been much better, and I would have been working on the assignment over an extended period of time as opposed to just 2 days or a day beforehand. So I thought that's going to be very useful for me in a classroom, implementing a project timeline to help these students track their progress, their milestones, and whatnot. So as we move on, do I agree or disagree? This chapter highlighted one particular idea that I thought was pretty neat, the idea of brainstorming. And I think it's so big in a classroom setting when it comes to helping students develop their thoughts. Like I said, chapter 5 was big on brainstorming, so I agree that brainstorming is important because it helps students draw out what the key components of like a topic are. One point in particular that like really caught my attention was when the author makes a point brainstorming. It's important for fostering creative ideas. In many instances, after the common ideas have been exhausted, I feel like teachers should even push for more brainstorming among like students, because I feel like ideas students seem to run out of ideas when all the common ones are hit. But I feel like we could foster even more if we encourage students to think deeper, think harder. So I think brainstorming is definitely key in any work that is turned in or not turned in, just to foster and develop ideas. Project-based learning. Final thoughts. It's important to want to get students involved. Like, you want to get students involved and buy in on this, because it'll be very beneficial to their learning, as opposed to, like the second point says, traditional styles of learning. This project-based learning is a fun alternative to it. So if we can get students to buy in, like, it would be awesome. And like I said, fun for student allows much more collaboration. At the end of the day, we want students to be talking to one another, growing in relationships, walking in life together. And I think it's key that these students are working with one another, because it's just going to translate and correlate to life later on when they're working in a big business. They're going to be working with people all the time, so they're building those key social skills. So for the most part, that's what I thought about the 3 chapters we read. Here's the reference page. I thought it was a good three chapters to read. Thanks for listening.